Hi guys, welcome back to the Comfort Table. I'm Cian and this is Teal. And today we wanted to do a video about being queer or like for Pride Month basically. So this will come out in the second week of June and this is I think in the US when Pride Month is. And for Singapore, the Saturday after this video is scheduled to air? It is
Publish?
18th. Yeah, so 18 June 2022 is Singapore's Pink Dot, which is when usually we celebrate, or we make it visible, that there's queer people in Singapore and stuff like that. I don't actually know that much about Pink Dot, so I won't go too much into it. But we debated about whether we want to make this video, and we weren't gonna do it, but recently I came across Heartstopper, which is this really cute young adult drama on Netflix that's about coming of age, and the main couple in the story are this gay boy and this other boy who slowly finds out that he's bisexual, and there's also other queer characters and queer cast in the story, which I find really cool. And honestly, the part that I personally found super interesting is the fact that one of them is a bisexual, because like I feel like bisexual representation is relatively rare compared to like gay or lesbian characters on TV and stuff like that. So that kind of renewed my interest in making this video. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a bit about being queer,
Being queer in Singapore.
and kind of like what we are, I guess, and some of our experiences.
First off, I guess it would be helpful to sort of identify what we are, which will sort of give context about the experiences that we will share later on.
So I personally have no issues with labels. I find them a useful tool, a useful kind of vocabulary to talk about how I am. They don't fully encompass who I am, but to me it's like it's an easy way to get across to people like roughly what I'm like. So I don't see an issue with it, but I know there are some people who do not like labels and find them restrictive, which, if that's how you feel about it, that's fine.
Yeah, I do agree that everyone lies on the spectrum to some extent, right? And labels only sort of identify points on the spectrum. But yeah, I agree that they're useful in, helping you find the sort of nearest point
Yeah,
that you are at.
So I think for you, labels are less accurate.
Less
than
accurate.
they are for me, or maybe I've just come to accept them.
But of course, having the vocabulary to even begin talking about your experiences or the things that you're feeling that you can't really put a word to is helpful.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the general vibe that we have with labels, and so whatever labels we mention later, just take them with like they are a general pin in where we are.
We're just using the label for convenience. But of course, let's say you have friends or you have acquaintances who also identify with these labels. It doesn't mean that how we feel is the same as how the person feels, because everybody's experiences are different.
Yeah, but regardless, I feel like getting somewhere close to where you feel like you belong or you feel represented is important, which is like, for example, how I suddenly felt really like yay when I realized that Nick was bi in the show.
The character
yeah,
in
the
Heartstopper.
character in Heartstopper is bi in the show. Okay, so we'll start off by how we feel about our own gender first.
And then who we are attracted to and what extent we are attracted to them.
Yeah, so do you want to start first?
Okay, so who we are,
Yeah.
right? So I guess I would identify as like Demi-girl or just Enby, but sort of vaguely there. So while I'm okay with the label of woman, I am not entirely satisfied with it. But that is not to say that I want to be labeled as a man, or I want to be labeled as androgynous, right? Or like agender. Yeah.
It's like the rest of the labels feel more unsuitable.
Yes, than the label woman or female. So my dissatisfaction with the female label comes from the societal expectations of femininity associated with it, more so than the biological fact that
Right.
I'm born a female.
Okay, maybe I'll just chime in here and say like I identify as MB now, meaning non-binary. And I've gone through a period where I kind of had similar thoughts to what I'm hearing from you, which is that like feeling mostly like a woman, except when society kind of expects certain things of you just because they're like, hey, you are a woman, you should be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure when I changed from that to
Okay, so
feeling MB,
what
but
are you now?
now I would say honestly speaking, and I think the same applies for you. Honestly speaking, it's not a thing that I think about very often.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me on most days, but there are periods when I'm like, like, you know, which I think a cisgendered person doesn't usually have to think about. But I don't feel like I'm a man. I'm okay with being referred to
She, her.
with female pronouns. I use she or they. I don't really get people to call me by they. I think historically, because I've grown up as a girl, I'm okay with being thought of as a girl. Not like currently because I am an adult person, but
We've also mentioned in one of our previous videos that the school uniforms in Singapore are gendered.
yeah,
So we were forced to wear
skirts for most.
like clothing that identify us as girls.
Yeah, so I wasn't entirely comfortable with that, but I also had the label of tomboy for most of that period. So it was
Same.
always like I didn't like being traditionally feminine, and it
Traditionally
was
girly.
yeah. And of course, at some point, I also wondered whether it was the whole, I don't know whether toxic femininity is a thing, but like, the idea of like women picking on women and therefore feeling like by not being a feminine woman, I am better than other women, which is a problem.
Which
also.
is another thing we should unpack.
But that's
sometime.
something else. And I think along the way, I've just kind of come to realize that when I'm alone, like without people, I don't think of myself as like being particularly male or female. I understand that I go through life with a lot of female-bodied experiences because I have a female body and I have been brought up female. So that is that, and I don't feel uncomfortable with that, but also like moving forward in life, I do not want to be perceived in like traditionally female roles, and not because of like toxic femininity or whatever the correct word to use for it at the moment is. It's not just because of that, but I don't want to be a man. I hate being mistaken for a man. I used to have this problem in the toilets because I have very short hair in secondary school, right? And that was a period of time where I think it's much less common for girls to have like really short hair.
In the boyish kind of style.
Yeah, in the boyish kind of style. So I used to go in the toilet and people would be like,
Yeah.
right. So I really hated that feeling, and I just didn't want to be mistaken for a man.
When I was younger, I also had similar hairstyle, and then I would actually use the male public restroom because the queues were shorter.
Really?
Yeah, but that was when I was very, very young, like below 12.
Oh, okay.
And then my dad would go in with me.
But to be fair, in Singapore, if you're like a child, like a literal
I think
child
that
with
was
your
like
parents,
below 7 or something.
I don't know, but a lot of times it's not uncommon for children of
To
like
see boys in the women's changing
yeah.
room
So
with their moms.
yeah, and I can only speak on that
The
because
women's
I have
changing
not
room.
been into the men's toilet after I don't know, like a very young age.
Yeah. Okay, enough about
Who
we are.
Or like one part of who we are.
And so like Cian mentioned that we don't really think about who we are unless it is in relation to someone else, right?
Or like in relation to, hey, you have now been invited to this event that requires you to be in formal attire. Yeah, so I don't think about being MB except when society is like, look at this very gender binary thing that we need you to do.
Like weddings.
Yeah. I hate those. Okay. I mean, not because I don't like attending weddings. Like, I feel happy for the people there, but like clothes on me, going to this formal event. What a pain.
Sidetrack.
Okay, so
So the people we are attracted to. Yes. So I'm attracted to men. So this was a bit of a confusion in the past because like I wasn't sure if I was a woman or not. So if I was a woman, then I'll be straight. But if I was trans, then I would be gay, right?
yeah. So this is also kind of what it started off with.
Who we are.
Okay.
So I used to joke that, you know, I was a gay in my past life and then I reincarnated as a woman or something. Yeah. On to you.
Okay, so I generally use the labels bi/pan. I usually just put them together out that way.
Which means?
So bi has a few different people define it differently. It could be like attracted to men and attracted to women, or attracted to my own gender and attracted to other genders. Pan kind of covers the whole spectrum of attracted to, any genders. And the reason why I use both bi and pan in my label is because I think there is a difference between how I'm attracted to men versus women versus like people of other genders. Like each offers something that is differently attractive. So that's why to me in my head there is still a distinction.
Are you attracted to the gender or are you attracted to the person?
I'm usually just attracted to the person, but like there is certain like whether aesthetics or behavioral characteristics that are very typical of certain genders that I find attractive. But the thing is also, right, I feel like I like it when it's the opposite of what's common. So
the gap moe.
yeah, but yeah, so like for example, somebody who is typically very maybe efficient but also very soft at heart, or like who is maybe a bit like macho, be a guy or a girl, but then also like very sensitive. So it's kind of like this difference, and I don't mean it in a like they have to be only sensitive to me, but like which I find that a bit problematic, but okay, anyway, it's a different topic. But it's just the idea of like there's different
facets to the person.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really the person themselves and not like what body they inhabit.
Yes, but I think a bit of it, right, is also that there are some typically masculine traits and typically feminine traits.
That you are attracted to?
And I like it when there's a mix of both in the person. I do also sometimes just use the label queer because it gets too troublesome.
To explain, as you can see, we spent however long we will edit this too.
Yeah, so sometimes I just want to say queer, but I feel like queer is
too like
sometimes
unsure
too broad.
Or ambiguous.
Yeah, sometimes too broad for a useful conversation. So
it's sort of like if you want you can ask me about it, but
yeah, I generally don't say it unless it's kind of in a context where it's not important to say what kind of queer I am, but it's important to mention that I am queer, like I'm not heteronormative.
Yeah. Hetero.
No, I'm not cishet basically. Yeah, but also I'm not heteronormative. So the last part, I guess, is
the extent of this attraction to our preferred peoples.
So this is something that to me is kind of like new-ish. I didn't really explore like the ace. Okay, so I should mention first. The label that I identify most with would be grey ace. But I also just generally mentioned that I think I'm just on the ace spectrum somewhere. Yeah, and it's a part of this LGBTQ label that I guess I came to figure out like the most recently being like the last 2 or 3 years. One, because as you can see, this is already like the third label of this spectrum that we're mentioning. So I've spent most of my time trying to figure out the first one and the second one. And the first one that I figured out was actually bi/pan. So that was two labels.
That went quite quickly though.
Yeah, but that was 2 labels. And then figuring out that I'm Enby was another one, which took a while. And then figuring out that I'm
grey ace. So what does this grey mean?
So I used to use Demi, which is that you only feel sexual attraction to someone after you kind of get to know them on a deeper level. But I switched to using grey is, which is kind of like, I guess it's sort of a bit more fluctuating. Like that may not be the definition of it, but that's how I kind of see it myself, which is that sometimes I think I maybe feel sexual attraction, but sometimes I don't. And to be fair, right, I think this is the label for me that is most in the works, because I'm not even really sure whether I'm anywhere on the spectrum of alosexual, which is feeling sexual attraction to people. So for now, I think grey is a pretty good like in between label,
Yeah.
because I'm not fully sure that I'm fully
So
ace.
we'll put a question mark at the end of that.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm squarely in the asexual label, which means that I don't feel sexual attraction. I do, however, feel romantic attraction. So yes, I have dated people, I am dating people, however you choose to put this. So there are some asexual people who do not engage in sexual intimacy at all, and there are some who do. So I'm part of those that does. I view it in a positive light, but to me, it's sort of just another activity that you do with your partner, and not, you know, any special top tier couple activity.
It's kind of like maybe you're like ambivalent about going to movies, but then your partner tends to like to go to movies, so sometimes you go for movies.
Yeah, it's like on
Or you may even suggest going for movies.
yeah,
Like that kind of the area
yeah.
of vibe, okay.
Yeah, like if you ask me, like on a Friday evening, would I want to like chill on the couch and watch a movie? Like just chill on the couch and watch a movie.
Like no additional meaning intended.
Like, would you want to Netflix and chill or Netflix and chill, right? Like, either is fine with me, but I would choose the plain Netflix and chill. So I guess to people who experience sexual attraction and romantic attraction often go hand in hand. But
it's quite difficult
to imagine it as being
Two different
separate.
things?
Yeah. So usually you imagine your romantic partner to be someone you would want to have physical intimacy with. But that is not the case for me, because I don't feel like I want to have physical intimacy with anybody.
Yeah, it's not just
not-
about your romantic
Yeah.
partner, right?
Yeah. So like maybe you see someone on the street and you're like, wow, they're really sexy, I wanna bang them. But no, I don't feel that way.
Yeah, and even having that sentence, right, it like took me a long time to realize that that is a sentence that people think of.
Yes.
Because, I mean, people don't go around saying things about being allosexual, right? So it's not really a thing that people talk about because it's assumed to be the norm. And
I believe it is probably the more common experience.
probably,
But you are open to physical intimacy.
yeah, I'm not repulsed by it.
So even if you're an ace, you would be like me. Like a sex positive ace. Asexual.
So like, yeah, that's why I think I fall on a more grey is spectrum, because I do not think like random person attractive, yes, let's, but also like I do not think about it at all. So I don't really know where that stands. But with that said, I feel like having gone through like the exploration for so many labels, I'm not particularly rushed on figuring out this one.
It'll come when it comes.
Yeah, I don't. I feel like the intersection of all these labels is probably more
Interesting, right? Than
well,
just the
yeah,
label
but it also
itself.
makes it quite difficult to explain to people like what I am.
Especially people who have never experienced any sort of, I guess,
Questioning
questioning about their whichever one of their identities.
whether their gender identity, their sexual identity, or like ace is also being part of the sexual identity, right? So yeah, it's quite difficult to talk. It's quite difficult to talk to people who've not had to think about this before, and that is why I think it's still important, I guess, to talk about being queer and to still celebrate like pride and things like that. Although generally on a day-to-day basis, it's not a very big deal, except when I meet resistance.
Yeah, it's not a big deal for us because
our orientation is kind of invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is sometimes a positive point and sometimes a negative point.
Let's talk about the positive, about having invisible orientations.
Yeah, so I think the positive is that generally people don't ask you any questions.
Yeah. For example, like we don't dress in a very flashy way.
Yeah. I don't dress in a very feminine way, but I don't dress in a masculine enough way for people to be like, you know, what are you?
Yeah, and I am grateful that the course of study that I chose and the workplaces that I have been, and I guess the changing opinion of society in general, are much more accepting of women wearing pants to work and wearing, you know, I guess not really masculine, but like not feminine clothing in a
Right.
workplace situation.
Yeah, I think definitely depending on the kind of workplace that you have. Not that they'll be like, why are you wearing pants? But there is still a bit of like a hesitance on our end feeling like if everyone wears a skirt on at least some days, should I also wear a skirt on at least some
Yeah,
days?
so thankfully I never had that expectation where I had to, you know, wear a skirt or a dress
It's good.
to prove that I'm female or because I'm female. Like, my clothes were not related to the job that I did, thankfully.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are some occupations where uniform is a part of it.
Right.
And also, I guess being female, and if you're lesbian or bi and you go out with your partner, it's easier to be mistaken as really good friends.
Right. That's the usual I guess the assumed perk of being bi, although it's kind of a perk that I never really I never really enjoyed it. Not that I never got to feel that way, but I never really enjoyed having that as a perk, right? Because to me, I think it depends on your level of how comfortable you are with touch in general. So like I'm the kind of person that generally I'm not a very touchy-feely person. So to me it's not like I'm very touchy-feely with my friends. Like I don't go around like doing this with my friends. So if I am doing this, it is probably with my partner, right? And sure, from the outside it may seem like we are just friends, so I guess that is kind of like sliding under the radar. People won't ask you too many questions. But at the same time it feels very strange because to me it's like an important distinction.
Yeah, like you want people to know that this person is your partner and not just your friend.
Yeah, so I tend to be a bit ambivalent towards this being a perk. Like it is, but not for me specifically, right? So, and of course, I'm sure you can also wonder whether it is really even a perk because it contributes to the bi-erasure
Yeah.
of being seen as straight in some ways or lesbian or gay in other ways, right? Depending on who your partner at that time is. And the thing is, it's not a very common thing, because not that many people know that I'm bi. Not because I'm not out, but just because there's no reason to mention it most of the time. Like my parents know that I'm bi. But the only like bi-erasure that I've kind of ever experienced actually came from somebody who's gay. And then they were saying that like compared to gay couples who can't really hold hands in public, being bi or being attracted to women from a woman-looking person, I kind of have the advantage, or I can get away with looking just like friends and having their behavior being accepted outside, which is what you were saying earlier, right?
Yeah.
But to me, it feels like bi-erasure, and that made me feel really uncomfortable, and it felt weirder because it was coming from somebody who was also queer. Right? I mean, I don't like it when cis-het people say it, but I can understand that it is not something that they have thought much about because it is not part of like their issues or things that they have to work through. So I understand that it's not in their vocab and they don't really think about this kind of stuff. But coming from another queer person, it feels very strange to me. And that is also why I'm I started to feel a bit more strongly about bisexual representation in like media. Not that I actively seek it out, but when I see it, I'm like, yay.
So now the cons of invisible
I've
orientation.
kind of
I think
talked a
you've
bit
kind of covered it in
about
that,
it.
you know, it gets erased and
You tend to get mistaken as like either straight or
yeah,
gay, depending on
probably
who
like
you're
for the
dating.
comfort of the cishet people's sensibilities.
Yeah, and I think another one that is quite common, but it wasn't directed at me, is the misunderstanding of bisexuals being promiscuous, which I think is a very common misconception. I'm not sure why.
Like just because you're accepted people.
Doesn't mean you're dating any of them though. But also, it's possible that a bisexual person is promiscuous, but it doesn't mean that bisexual people are all promiscuous.
Yeah, they're
You know,
mutually exclusive.
yeah. But it tends to be that, you know, if a person is promiscuous and also bi, it will be brought up that they are promiscuous because they are bi. And having to hear that conversation at a workplace, not directed at me, just people gossiping while I overhear that conversation, not intentionally, is like not fun.
Can you think of any other cons?
Any other cons? I feel like the major one would really be that like when it's usually not an issue, but once in a while it comes back as an issue or something that you have to work through during that period in your life. And when you talk to other people about it, they're like very taken aback by
That
why
it's an issue.
that it's an issue at all. Right, because I appear relatively cis-het, I guess, on most periods. Like I've had 2 relationships, one with a girl and one with a guy, and most people only know about the one with the guy. So from the outside,
but it's
it
also
looks
your
like,
more recent one.
yeah, but from the outside it looks like I'm straight, so I can kind of understand why it seems like where did this question of being queer come from, you know? But it's like I've been questioning since I was in secondary school. It's like it's beyond 10 years. So people being a bit like even if well-meaning, sometimes they are like, oh, but have you considered ABCD, all of which I have probably considered within the first 5 years of me questioning. Because it's really it being an invisible orientation means people don't actively think of you that way, right? And they don't realize that even though it's not a problem for me most of the time, sometimes it comes up as an issue. And I have had multiple people tell me, I didn't know you think about this so often. Like, why does this issue keep coming back? And I'm like, this is just my life. This is just my life as a queer person.
This is just your...
This is just me being queer.
That you have to deal with.
Yeah, it's like existential dread. It comes back every once in a while, you know? Like, I don't ask for existential questions to come to me. They just appear and I question them.
The other thing about that I have experienced, I guess being ace, is that because I do like making dirty jokes.
Oh, right.
And I do pole dancing. Some people actually question my aceness when I tell them that I'm ace. They're like, oh, you can't be ace because, you know, you make so many sex jokes and you're like doing sexy dance.
It feels very invalidating.
Yeah, it does.
To be like, just because I make dirty jokes I can't be ace.
Yeah, to me it's like a form of wordplay, right? It's a pun, basically.
Right. But I guess most people don't see it that way.
Yeah, most people see it as like you're perpetually horny or something.
Honestly, I'm very curious. Like because I think it's more common to hear what people on the A spectrum feel about sex, right? And I feel like part of the reason why, at least for me, I have a lot of questions about being ace is because I don't know what allosexuals think. Like, if that was more, maybe I should search it out, but if that was a more common topic that people talk about, I feel like I will compare my
experience
with theirs and be like, that is closer to what I feel or that is very far from what I feel. But because like, I guess the tendency is to hear it from people who do question, right? So obviously people who are not allosexual. And therefore you get like a bit of a distorted
Yeah.
Because I think you're right in that most people are allosexual and once in a while when I come up against them, I'm like, oh, right.
This is usually not an issue.
Yeah. But that's because we have friends who are a bit more understanding.
I guess we can call them allies.
I don't really know all their labels, but basically when we talk about it, it doesn't feel like an issue. And then when you talk to some other people that maybe you don't know as well, or maybe like other friends or colleagues or whatnot, and then you realize, oh, right, being queer has always been an issue, right, with other people.
I guess the ace-erasure that I face also has to do with the fact that I more or less identify as female, because most of these, like, I guess, hypersexualized words and behaviors are expected of men. So when women do it, it's perceived that they are, you know, horny or hypersexual, right? Or like super sex positive or whatever you choose to call it, instead of asexual, which is the opposite of what you would expect.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it that way. Because I'm usually not the one making the dirty jokes, but I do laugh at them. I just don't make it. I have a question for you. So, like, what was the first label that you actually started questioning?
So, like you, I always labeled myself as like a tomboy, which is a girl, yes, but boyish. So that wasn't much of an issue. Yeah,
I'm just curious because you talk with a lot more depth about being ace, whereas I talk more in depth about being bi or pan, right? And I just wonder whether like the first label that you come across, you might have more to say because you have just had more time to think about it. Or like the earlier, because for example for me, like I said, the ace label is the latest one that I'm digging through, right? So that's the one I have the least to say about. Yeah, so that's why I wonder, or whether it maybe it's just you feel a bit more strongly about this over other things.
I think I've always felt strongly or more drawn towards or more like closer to certain labels, but of course I have, you know, questioned around it, but always come back. So I guess the one that I was most unsure about or most, you know, I took the biggest detour would be my gender, I guess. Because there was this period I thought, you know, I could be trans.
So that's really like you really try like very different, really like being woman,
being man.
Yeah, right. Before you came back to where you feel now. Right?
But conversely, I was always sure that I was attracted to men, but not sexually. Yeah. I do think women are cool, but I wouldn't want to
like date one.
Yeah.
I personally just feel like my overlap of all the like, you know, the spectrum of bi plus Enby just makes it really hard to pinpoint what's going on because all of it is like all these genders. You know, it's like it is.
So labels are helpful, but they're not a be all end all, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess today's video is kind of like a skimming of the water of being queer. Like, yeah, I mean, mostly we just shared our own queer experiences.
And maybe you have friends around you who are also on the spectrum, but, you know, have invisible orientations.
Yeah,
they sort of get along with life under the radar.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's not a big deal most of the time, but I felt like it was still meaningful to talk about it because it's not commonly represented. It's not common to find this particular intersection of orientations as well, so
because there's so many different people, right? And there's so many different identifications.
Yeah, so I don't know whether this helps anyone, but like
there's more of us than you think.
Yeah, maybe it does. So it's really just like putting it out there to be like, you know, there's a lot of invisible queer people like us who are just here minding our own business.
Watch what you say because you could hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah, but I mean more than that, I feel like if anything, being willing to have conversations about things, but also sometimes knowing when people are maybe not prepared to have conversations about things, and you don't have to be like, I'm queer to everybody.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are other facets of your life that's more important than just being like, I'm queer, but it doesn't mean that it's not an important thing that you're queer.
Yeah, but perhaps because we are not so inconvenienced by what we are,
That we don't feel as strong of a need to be like, we are here
to
and we are
advocate for it.
queer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't particularly want to make a video at first because I felt like I didn't feel very strongly about being queer. But occasionally I do.
Yeah.
So I guess that's today's video.
Yes,
Questioning
please,
queers.
please support pink.sg.
Yeah, you can support it without going also if that's not your thing, because I'm not going.
Yeah, I usually just support from home, from my heart.
Because as much as I'm queer, I'm also very introverted and
And I don't want to go to places with crowds.
yeah. Like even before COVID, I just didn't really like crowds. They're very tiring. So yeah, anyway. That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching and we'll see you all next time. Bye!